Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kit Car Chat on the 7spot YouTube channel. I'm Trevor, and today we're talking to somebody, a very good friend of ours, who has dipped their toe a little while ago, nearly 20 years, into the world of kit car manufacture. And that person is our great friend, Trevor. I hope you enjoy this. If you do, please consider becoming a 7spot subscriber and maybe even just drop us a like. Hope you enjoy this one. So how does this all start? Well, where do all these stories start? Quite often on eBay. I've been fiddling around with cars and motorcycles since I was a teenager. I built a Robin Hood, put that through SVA as it was at the time. I put a couple of cars through for other people, and I was looking for my next project. Wandering around on eBay one night, I come across this kit car business for sale, and cut an awful long story short, the guy that owned it was in Spain. The building where it was stored was due to be demolished, so he needed to sell it in a hurry. So, yeah, after a bit of negotiation, we got together, and I got a friend with a truck, and we went up to sort of collect all the bits and pieces that were there. So what was the Firefly, and what did you actually buy? Well, the Firefly, it was introduced by Onyx, who originally designed it back in the early 1990s. And it was like a shrunken MX-5. And it was based on all things Fiat Panda, which doesn't sound great, but it was a really powerful little engine, and the car was quite light. So initially it had some good sales, sold about 50 of them. And then it went on to be owned by Formby Kit Cars, which was John's kit car business. What did I get? Well, not a great amount, to be honest with you. I got 3 cars, one of which was reasonable, one of which wasn't great, and one of which had the bodywork damage. And I got a set of jigs with it as well. And there was a sort of collection of bits and pieces of parts, convertible roofs, that kind of thing. So what happened next? Well, once we got it all back, the missing element obviously was the moulds, because I didn't mention those before, did I? And as everything, there's a bit of a story that John told me where they were, but wouldn't actually contact the company on my behalf. So I never did find out what the backstory to that was. And initially, they weren't that receptive when I rang up and asked about them, because they said they were stored out of the way and it was expensive to get them out and all that kind of thing. But thankfully, my silver tongue saved the day, and they agreed to get them out. And I went up and picked them up, and they were actually up in Lincolnshire. So this project was scattered all over the country. So we got it back home, and then I started looking for basically subcontractors to do the bodywork, i.e. the fiberglass, and also the chassis. And the chassis is a little bit of a story, because the jig really wasn't great, and we had to put in an awful lot of work to sort it out. And that was the first big learning point. I thought it was just going to be fairly much a plug and play project, and it really wasn't. So that was a bit of an eye opener. And in fact, we had to scrap another Fiat Panda to use its parts to improve the chassis. And we also created a number of sub jigs. So the accuracy of the car we built was considerably better than any of those that went before. So the car was SVA compliant? Wow, SVA, yeah, that's learning point number 2. This car came from obviously the days before SVA was introduced. So there were a few things that were going to have to be done. And for example, it was a curvature at the bottom of the dash, all those sharp projections from all various corners of the car you have to be aware of. So there were going to have to be quite a few tweaks to get it through SVA. The only good thing was, because it was a fully covered fiberglass body, it meant that we didn't have exposed suspension or anything like that. So that did make the job a lot easier. Okay, so you're getting yourself organised. What did you do to promote it? Well, I will say one thing up front, definitely, the Kit Car Press were brilliant. Whether it was Kit Car Magazine at the time, or as it was then, Which Kit, Total Kit Car, with their website, they were all really good. We had an initial relaunch at the Exeter Kit Car Show, because I brought the project back in the sort of middle of 2004, and Exeter Kit Car Show back in those days was in November, and that's where we had our relaunch and done quite a lot of PR up to it. We had obviously the website running. Bear in mind, these are the days before YouTube and before Facebook, so we having to go a little bit old school on this. So we did Exeter. We seemed to get quite a good reception. Didn't get any orders, which was a little bit disappointing. Went on, did other shows through the year. We did one at Brands Hatch, which was like a track day version of a show organised by Total Kit Car. We did, of course, do Stoneleigh in the main hall there, which was really great. Lots of visitors, lots of people that were engaging with us. But it was just trying to get someone to actually commit. And that was the biggest problem. It almost seemed like people needed you to be there a few years before they would actually put the hand in the pocket. Anything across the channel in Europe? Ah, yes, you've triggered that memory of mine of the weekend in Belgium. We did, which I think was possibly the only ever continental kit car show. It was well supported by the Brits. I was there. Those of you who've been into to kit cars for a little while would remember a company called Tifosi. The guy that owned that, I actually went over with him, and Hawk Cars were there with Jerry Hawkridge, and I think Den Tanner was there with Pilgrim Cars and with Kit Car Magazine. So it was a really good turnout. But the funny story with that is that being British, we all got there when it opened at 9 o'clock, and we were all sort of, suit the booted, ready for the crowds to come whizzing in, and just no one turned up till midday. It was quite incredulous, and they had quite an exciting band on the Saturday night, and yeah, it was quite an experience. The only good thing with me, I met somebody who's going to come into play in this story a little bit later on, so just keep that in the back of your memory for now, Trevor. So you've got the kit organised, you've been promoting it. Did the orders start flooding in? Yeah, I'm afraid it didn't. It's the second Exeter Kit Car Show we did. I've got to be honest, I had a bit of a light bulb moment, and it was really, ironically, it was the car that had probably inspired the Firefly previously, which was the Mazda MX-5. Now, the Mazda at that point, when the Firefly was launched, was a really expensive car back in the early 90s. Go forward 10 years or so, it suddenly became quite an affordable car. And the problem was, I was trying to sell a kit for, I think from memory, I think the kit was about 3,000. And I was hoping people could build it from sort of about 4,000 if you were quite efficient, shall we say. And at that time, for that kind of money, you could buy a very good MX-5, and things like Z3s were starting to come down. And those sports cars now, which have flooded the market, such as Boxsters and SLKs, why would people spend so much time in the garage building something which isn't as good as a mainstream car? And that time, there just wasn't, I felt, people were interested in looking at cars. There just wasn't the appetite for people to actually pick the spanners up and do it themselves. And I think that has been borne out really in the way that the kit car world has gone. It's shrunk considerably, and there's an awful lot of these panel type kits now. And I think that's a reflection of the number of people that really want to pick up spanners and build cars. They just aren't there anymore. So you didn't look at building turnkey cars? Oh, there's another funny story. Well, you're picking up some good ones here. Now, when I was at Stoney, I had an approach from an Italian guy who wanted me to produce these cars, built, ready to go, SVA registered, and export them to Italy. And I thought, oh, this could be good. And he was talking about a first order of 10 cars. And so you start to crunch the numbers. The only thing was, when we got further down the road of negotiation, he wanted them to be cheaper than a Fiat Barchetta, ready-built, virtually new cars. And there was no way, with the time each one would take to build, that I would ever be able to do it. So, and again, you're up against those mass manufactured cars, and the number of people that would be prepared to invest in a small niche car like that were unfortunately too small. So it didn't really work out then. How did you sort of offload it or sell it? Yeah, yeah. And where do you go when you want to offload something? Back where the story started, back to eBay. The one good thing was all the work I'd done over the years promoting it had given it a bit of a market presence. Even though I hadn't really sold any, people knew it existed and would recognise it. So that was quite good. And going back to that trip to Belgium, there was a Dutch guy that contacted me that said, "Hey, remember me from Holland? I would like to buy it." And we did a deal, and it was one of those nice deals where actually it sort of worked for everybody, because what the outcome was that he effectively bought 3 cars which were registered. He could take them back to Holland, and what he paid me for the business, he had in the value of the cars. So he was never really going to lose. And he did try trading it over there for, I think, a couple of years, and then he's called it a day as well. So as far as I'm aware, that's where the moulds and the jigs now are. So you've dipped your toe in the market. What advice would you give to anyone else? Just don't. Just don't. It's very much what I think. The old line is, the only way to make a small fortune out of kit cars is to start with a large one. And that, to be fair, that doesn't go for all cars. I think a lot of things have changed, particularly over the last 20 or so years. But there are a number of these cars that come on the market, or projects, or however you describe them, occasionally, and they're quite attractive. Sometimes they're quite cheap. Sometimes people are very over ambitious of what they're asking for it. But you need to look at what you're buying and how relevant it is now. That was a mistake I made, was that I looked very narrow at what was going on in the kit car world and didn't think about mainstream cars which could do the same job. And you need to look and see how relevant the project you're looking at is now. If you look at the market now, it's populated by Caterham 7 style cars, Cobras, a few specialist replicas like the Stratos and GT40. Those ones that are similar to a mainstream car, I think will also always struggle. And it's, I think kits have a life cycle if there's something a bit bespoke. And I think probably the Firefly was a cracking example of that. That it sold nearly 50 in the first few years. There was an appetite in the market for them. The donors were plentiful. And just quickly, that's the other thing. Check on the availability of donors for whatever you're looking at. And yeah, they're very, if the market for it is sleeping, it's very difficult to wake it up again unless you've got something very special. So would you do it again? No, absolutely not. I would, yeah. When you go to a show, and I quite often have this conversation I go with friends, and I do get on my soapbox, is that you'll go on a stand and somebody was selling a bracket for something, for example. I don't know. Let's say a cycle wing bracket. I've seen people pick stuff up and they'll look at it and go, that's only 10 quid's worth of steel. He wants 100 quid for it. Well, the reason he wants 100 quid for it is there is so much time you have to put in to get that bracket right. That's the research and development that you're paying for. And the numbers of these components they sell are quite small. So you need to consider that there's a lot of time and effort's gone in to be able to make that so you can bolt it on. And I think the market has changed in all those ways that I mentioned, of all the stuff that mainstream manufacturers produce, and also there just doesn't seem as big an appetite for people to build their own vehicles as what there was 25 years ago. And there's very much a need for people for instant gratification, which just isn't there now. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little insight into becoming a kit car manufacturer. Here on 7 Spot, we like to bring you lots of kit car related content. And if you've got a story you'd like to talk to us about, please get in touch. But in the meantime, click that subscribe button and you'll get a reminder for next time we bring you some unique kit car content. Drive safely, everyone.